Welcome to the Popish Plot. I'm Nate.
I'm Jessica.
And I'm Mike.
And this is Halloween.
Yes.
Or, as it was once known, All Hallows Eve.
Yes. And today we are dressed up in various costumes.
That's right. I am the head camp counselor at the newly reopened Camp Crystal Lake. We've gotten rid of the serial killer. The serial killer that was plaguing this place has been put to death. Everything is good now. Everything's going to be great. It's going to be a good, wholesome place for kids to come and have fun during the summer. What could possibly go wrong?
And I am a vanishing hitchhiker in the subset of Resurrection Mary, but not actual Resurrection Mary, as A, she was a real person, and B, I do not have any 1930s formal wear. And it's always the 50s and 60s that you get the most stories from anyway of the type.
And I'm Catholic Answers senior apologist and host of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, Jimmy Akin, before he lost all the weight through intermittent fasting. Before he cracked the mystery of weight loss.
And today, we're here to talk about...
important theological truths from teen slasher films.
All right.
And it's important to recognize that there is only the one truth, Jesus Christ, and you can find that truth in all kinds of things, including...
teen slasher horror movies. Yeah,
And they're curiously accurate, sort of, theological truths.
Yes, so I took the rules from the first 3 Scream films, because by the time you got to number 4, it was kind of self-reflective on itself.
Yeah.
And, you know...
In the original Scream film, there is a scene in which a character played by, I think it's Jamie Kennedy, who goes through and lays out the rules for how you should behave if you are in a horror film. And then, of course, the remaining cast break every single rule. And most of them end up dead.
Because they broke the rules.
Because they broke the rules.
So let's dive into those.
Yep.
All right. Number 1 rule in a horror film is if you want to live to the end, you can never have sex.
Nope.
Now, the important thing is they're all teen slashers. So it's not like it's a married couple. It is all, boyfriends and girlfriends or random guy and random drunk girl.
No fornicating.
Yes,
fornication
that really
equals
is,
death.
That really is the thing. Therein lies the theological truth that fornication is not a path to holiness and therefore should be avoided.
They also have a related one, again with the fact that these people are all underage, of they should never drink or do drugs.
Nope.
Well, and in most cases, if you will watch these films, these are not individuals who are looking at moderate use of any intoxicative substances.
They're going to binge.
They are, in fact, looking to ride that dragon, if you will, all the way to the last stop, kind of a thing. They want to get really drunk. They want to get really high. They want to,
Yes, and then the third one, we finally get into ones that are more than just, disobeying major rules and moral things are bad, of never ever under any circumstance say I'll be right back, because you won't.
Well, but even this reflects the theological truth. In the letter of James, it says, we are told, don't say, we will do this next year. Say, if the Lord permits, we'll do these things in the year to come. Because none of us ever know how much time we have.
The real problem that this one runs into is the sin of presumption, if you will. That, when you go and you say something like, oh, I don't know, nothing bad could possibly happen now, you are presuming things which are really entirely in God's hands, and it's not your place to go and try to force a situation wherein he has to play by your rules.
Exactly.
Next? Next we get to the second film, which is a sequel, which I feel the rules work very well on when you think you've defeated a sin.
Yes.
Because the first one is that the body count is always bigger.
Yep.
So, if you're like, being presumptuous, I have totally mastered this thing, and then you fall into the sin again, you'll probably fall worse than you started out.
Yeah.
The instruction that, once a demon is cast out, if you don't replace that with good holy habits, He'll bring seven other ones back, and your condition will be worse than it was before. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. But it also points to the basic metaphysical logic of the first three rules. When you commit little sins, when you transgress the rules, you're opening yourself up to bigger transgressions. In this case, axe murder and whatnot.
Yep. And the number 2 rule for this movie goes pretty much the same, as the death scenes are always much more elaborate.
Yep.
It gets bigger.
Mm-hmm. And because with the singing rebounding, it tends to take a turn for the worst kind of a thing.
We very rarely just settle on, okay, I've sinned this much and I'm not going to do any more, because you keep looking for bigger and bigger thrills.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It very much goes back to that thing that you get with addicts, where they build up a tolerance to a certain level of things, and in order for them to keep getting the same effect that they used to get, they have to go higher and higher.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Mm-hmm. And then the third one from this film, which is cut off, but it was like in the trailer, is if you want a sequel to become a franchise, never, never, ever, under any circumstance, assume the killer is dead.
Yep. Because he's not.
No. And the theological truth there is that we are broken individuals. We have a propensity towards sin. And even if we were to one day master a particular sinful impulse, that sin has never actually been defeated.
The most dangerous thing you can ever do is say,
I'm good now.
I'm totally done with that. It'll never be a problem again. And this is similar to what you were saying earlier about the parallels between addiction and sin. Some of the wisdom from the 12-step process. An alcoholic has to always admit he's still an alcoholic, even if he hasn't had a drink in 20 years. Because when you stop saying that, then you say, well,
I'm good now, and I can maybe have a drink.
Yeah. Yep.
And then they fall right back into that same loop. And because they've already, reached a point within that loop, when they fall back in, they fall back harder.
Yep.
And continuing in on the constant work of sin / how Sid is like the killer in a slasher film.
Mm-hmm.
Next rule is you've got a killer who's going to be superhuman. Stabbing him won't work. Shooting him won't work. Basically, in the third film, you've got to cryogenically freeze the head, decapitate him, or blow him up.
But that's it. I've still seen Jason in space, so they can survive forever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
into other environments.
After about 3 films in a franchise, they do a certain amount of shark jumping. So he went from being not actually the person to a ghost to some demon that constantly is in whatever body that always looks the same but cannot follow.
Absolutely.
But they're just one-upping it at that point.
But the theological truth that's in there is that we live in a world in which sin is pervasive. It's fundamentally broken in that the original connection that was designed to be between it and its creator has been cut, and that sin, regardless of how good we do, as I said earlier, regardless of how good we do it at mastering it in our own lives or other people in theirs, it's always there. We have the expectation, the hope of the day when God will come and effectively unmake this world and remake a new one wherein sin does not exist.
But until then,
sin is always going to be a part of this world. There is nothing that you can do that will effectively put it to death.
And despite all the fighting we do against each other and pointing out each other's sins and all of those things, every person is our brother and our sister. Our real enemy is supernatural. Is the devil and his fallen angels. We don't battle against flesh and blood. We battle against those powers and principalities. And we don't have the power to defeat them.
No.
Only God can. So don't ever presume that you've beaten them by whatever practices you've adopted.
All right. Next one is anyone, including the main character, can die.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, in many horror films, the sequel usually features or at least in the earlier days of the slasher horror films, the sequel usually featured the one person who survived the previous film being killed in order to usher in the next wave of killers.
Well, and it's the best way to subvert expectations, because this is the one person who survived the previous movie. The audience goes in thinking, oh, okay, that's the hero. They'll survive this one too. Mm-hmm. There is nobody who's secure.
And in the theological sense,
there's nobody who's secure.
There is nobody who's secure. There is nobody who is above sinfulness.
Mm-hmm. The greatest saints are those who knew that they themselves were sinners and knew that they were always vulnerable to sin. They didn't presume, oh, well, I've come this far. I'm no longer in need of anything. St. John Paul II, he went to confession every single day.
Yeah.
It's if a spiritual writer is saying, I'm safe now, that's when you should be worried. Because the real holiness knows that any one of us can fall at any time. Although, I'm not that familiar with the Halloween movies, so Jamie Lee Curtis kept surviving, didn't she?
Yes.
So far.
It's the exception that proves the rules. Next.
All right. And the last one from the original trilogy ones is the past will come back and bite you in the ass. Whatever you think you know about the past, forget it. The past is not at rest.
Mm-hmm. Well, so often we like to say, all right, that's over. It's done.
That's the thing I did. I can now move on.
But there are consequences, and they're always going to come back and bite you. If you don't deal with them, they're going to reemerge in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Yeah, the great example, King David. He couldn't just say, oh, yep, sorry, I shouldn't have done that, and then walked away. Even after he'd been reconciled to God, his kingdom was forever after having Uriah the Hittite killed and stealing his wife, his kingdom was ever after plagued by violence.
Mm-hmm. The only concession really that he got was that the worst of it wouldn't happen until after he was already gone.
Mm-hmm.
Which is quite often the way these things work, in that many of the things that we do that are broken and fractured, they have long-reaching consequences, and the worst of what comes from them is not what we immediately see, but in fact what happens after it's been distilled out and passed down multiple generations.
Yep. And only later could we look back and say, oh dear.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
Yeah. So, I know what you did last summer. Your sins will come to revisit you again. You can really learn a lot from watching cheap slasher movies.
Yeah. We should maybe watch more cheap slasher movies.
Yes, that's really the lesson here. Next.
That's
the end. That's the end of the rules.
There's
there you go.
3 for each.
There you go. Perfect.
I mean, there's the general ones that, are in horror films that, don't quite work. Don't go in the basement. The car battery will totally be dead, even if it was fine 5 minutes ago. But those are in world rules, not really.
So really, as on a theological level, this breaks down into 2 rules. Number 1 is to avoid all instances and near occasions of sin.
Because sin doesn't stay small, it'll get bigger and bigger.
Exactly. And number 2 is always avoid the additional sin of presumption.
Mm-hmm.
Do not ever presume that sin won't raise its ugly head again, that you are somehow protected from it, or that you have somehow beaten it.
Mm-hmm. Except in your case. I am absolutely confident that this time...
Yeah, no,
Camp Crystal Lake will be totally safe.
We've got this all nailed down. Camp Crystal Lake is going to be good.
In other circumstances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But...
Well, so there's 3 ways we could look at this. But I'll be honest, this is a mystery that I would rather investigate from a distance. So please comment below with what you've learned from cheap slasher movies. like this episode, subscribe to our channel, ring the church bell to be notified the next time. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm not presuming to be in charge here, and I'm a little freaked out, honestly. Until then, live your faith, love your faith, share that love, and I feel like I should leave.